welcome back to another episode of Hustlers Highlights. What we do here on my channel is we discuss movies and TV shows and things within that space. So today I wanted to kind of go back to a previous topic I discussed before, and this segment is going to be the state of our media. What brought this back to my attention is that on Monday I did a movies and TV news segment, and I did discuss the box office performance of Snow White at the time, which was pretty minuscule considering that they had a $209 million budget on the movie. And then it got me thinking, and it snowballed a little more and a little more. And I decided, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to discuss the state of our media once again, but this time get a little more in depth about how things actually work in the industry, and then kind of the state of the industry right now and some of the pitfalls and windfalls that we are currently living in because of some of the decisions that are being made by studio heads. And with that, I mean this. So let's do a little bit of a instructional, if you will. So a lot of people don't know, and I didn't realize this until I was discussing with my wife not too long ago, but a movie is really a business. And I don't mean like the movie industry is a business. Of course it is. But I mean, each individual movie is a business. And what a lot of people don't realize is that just like a business, you have your CEOs and there's a chain of command in every business. And then of course, once the business becomes public, there's also investors, there's shareholders. A movie is not much different than that. It's not much different than your average stock on the stock market. And a lot of people assume that a movie is made by the studio, so therefore it is paid for by the studio. That is a very, very, very big misconception. The studios don't have that much money. Think about how many movies they're producing a year, along with how many TV shows they're making under that studio name. That they would have to have basically an unlimited amount of funds, and they don't. What they are doing is they are going out and getting investors, and these investors are signing, not very uncommon to us common folk, a contract. And in that contract, they're basically setting out the parameters of, let's just give out a generic example. The studio wants to make a movie. They have an idea for a movie. They have a projected box office amount they intend to make. And they present the cost of said movie to investors. And these investors say, hey, let's say, for example, the movie's going to cost us $120 million to shoot, edit, post-production, pre-production, and market. They present that to the investors and say, we're going to shoot this movie. It's going to cost us in totality about $120 million to make. On the back end, you'll make X amount off that movie once we get the money from the end product, the end result, the box office money, and then of course any direct to video, direct to consumer market that we may have. And that's how that game goes. So what happens is you get this business portfolio that really the investors are looking for return on profits. That they're not investing into this movie to lose, and they're definitely not investing into the movie to cut even. They're investing because they see a potential and a profit margin here. And I brought that up because when we say things like Snow White spent $209 million to make, or the budget for it was $209 million, you're thinking, well, whoa, all they need to make is $209 million to break even. That's not true. Because in a nutshell, what happens is you still have to pay your studio overhead or your investors. you still have to pay the theaters because the theaters are the one that are showing the movie. So they get a third, and then the overhead gets a third, and then you have the marketing that has to be paid. So roughly about you need to make about 3 times the amount of what it costs to make the movie back to pay back everybody who helped you put the movie out in the first place. And then once you've gotten to that point, that's when you start making stock profit. That's when you're saying your movie is bringing the studio X amount of dollars. Anything before that, you haven't broke even yet. As a matter of fact, you're probably in a deficit, um, in which those investors intend to claim, regardless if you make the money on the movie or not. Well, the reason why that is important is because the state of our media right now, when it comes to movies and TV shows, is in a really, really dangerous position because they really are making movies for what I would consider to be way too much money. It's really a fallacy for you to assume that your movie will make 600, 700, 800 million dollars when you haven't even put it in front of your audience to see how they feel about it. And when you make it normal to make a movie for 200 million, 180 million, 170 million dollars, what you're saying is you're basically cashing in all your chips every time you come up to play. And that's just not a good way to it's not a good way to play this game in any direction. Even on the back of a scratch off, it tells you please gamble responsibly. um, so it's just really a dangerous game to play, and we're starting to see it. That's why a lot of your movies nowadays that were set up to be, sequels and trilogies and sagas, they get cut short because the original, the launch movie, it cost the studio so much money to make, and then they end up losing on the back end. So like, okay, well, we can't keep investing in this. We've lost investors. No one's willing to help us make the next movie. So a lot of your tentpole movies that probably would have been franchises get nixed before they even get off the ground. The reason why that is important is because it doesn't just affect the movie theater. There was a time when a movie was made for a reasonable amount and the theaters understood that, hey, we made this movie for hypothetically 50 million. Okay. And then we spent 10 million to market it. And so that's a $60 million full overall budget. And then they make, let's say nowadays that would seem like they didn't make anything. But let's say they made $200 million on that movie. Well, that's not bad. They made $20 million over what it costs to make it overall, and any dollar past that is profit. Well, then you also have your direct to consumer. Back then we had DVD, we had Blu-ray. So then you also had a different market to bring in more income after your movie theater run was over. But now we have reduced the theater runtime. Movies used to, it was perfectly normal for a movie to sit in a theater for 120 days, 90 days. Now it is not unheard of for a movie to do a 3-week run in the movie theater and go straight to streaming. And the problem with that is if you're making a movie for even $100 million and you only give it a 3-week window in a theater, and then maybe a 1 week direct to digital window, and then after that 4th week it's on the next streaming platform, well, you're not really expecting to make any money off the streamer, are you? Because the majority of your streamer subscribers already subscribed. So you end up in a position where you are losing hand over fist. And before you start to think, well, it's not really the studio's fault. You have to remember the studios are the one who's made the streaming platforms in the first place. Warner Brothers made Max. Paramount made Paramount Plus. Before HBO, before Max, there was HBO. Now it's HBO Max, and then turned into Max. Um, Stars and all your Big Ten. I think the only one who has made it a point not to go straight out and make their own platform has been Sony, but Sony originally was a gaming platform, so why would they do that to start with? The issue we're running into is that because, and I mentioned this in my last State of Our Media topic, but I didn't dive a lot as far as how this is costing the studio and then inadvertently costing us. What happens when a studio is spending that amount of money? Like I mentioned, the majority of that money is coming from investors. And we live in a fool me once, you won't fool me twice world. And if you tell an investor, hey, we're going to make a mummy movie starring Tom Cruise, that sounds captivating. That sounds like a winner. That sounds like something you can sink your teeth into, and you should get money on the back end from this movie. And then you tell the investor, not only are we doing that, we're going to make a whole franchise about this. It's going to be like a dark franchise with mummies and aliens and werewolves and all this stuff. And then the first movie comes out and it bombs. Well, now you went out and you spent $250, $300 million in this movie. And the reality of it was that wasn't a good investment, because what's the odds of you making $900+ million in this movie to begin with? So now you just screwed your investors who won't come back to the table with you on the next one. And it's a game. It's a game of losing cards, and it's going to be a perpetual game of losing cards. When you do things like that, it's a snowball effect. You'll also have taught the theaters to not trust your movies. We shouldn't give your movies that many screens, because in our history with you, your movies don't perform well. No one wants to see them. And movie theaters make their money on concessions. So they don't make it on ticket prices. Of course, they keep the buildings and the lights on with the ticket prices, but the majority of what they make as a profit comes from the popcorn, the candy, the drinks. That's why they cost you $40 to feed you people in the theater. That's where they get their money from. Well, if you're sending me a movie and you're telling me when this movie was being made, this movie is worth you putting on 2,000 screens, and then we do that, and then we make a fraction of what you said we'll make off of it. Well, next time when you make a movie, we won't do that for you. And who does that ultimately hurt? It ultimately hurts the consumer. It ultimately hurts the people who are going out to watch these movies, who are investing time and money to go out, get a babysitter, spend money at concessions, buy the ticket, block off time in your life, because at the end of the day, the one resource you can't renew is time. That's the one thing you can't get back. So not only are you training the investors not to trust you, but you're also training the theaters not to trust you, and then inadvertently you're training the audience not to trust you. So this snowball effect you've created is now turning into a avalanche, and it's only getting worse by how much you're spending to make the movies in the first place. And then, as I mentioned, let's not forget that the studio were the one that made the streamers. So that back end money they used to get in DVD sales and in Blu-ray sales, well, they won't get that anymore because they made streaming, and streaming killed physical media. So if you see where I'm going with this, everything that they're doing is kind of like chasing that golden goose, or the goose that lays the golden egg. When you're running and you're running and you're running and you're running, and you finally catch the goose, and then you realize that the eggs it's laying is just regular eggs. There's nothing golden about them. There was no rainbow at the end of the road. It was just a regular goose. So I do think that at some point they will catch on, and we will, unfortunately for us who bit the hype, we would end up with some amalgamated version of cable just on digital. Um, but they're gonna have to fix it. Yeah, and they're gonna have to fix it fast, because if you don't, then you end up in a situation where you've made more problems than you can solve. And obviously, their bottom line is making money off this entertainment. And before they start to lose money hand over fist perpetually, they'll make some adjustments. So that I'm not too concerned about. Ultimately, it'll get adjusted out. But in the meantime, we're the ones paying for it. If you think about it, if you have the Disney Plus bundle with Hulu and Max, and you're spending $30+ a month to watch entertainment on those platforms, well, that's the $30 a month that you would have probably spent to go watch a movie in the theater. And that in turn makes you feel like maybe I'll just wait for streaming. I'm already giving them $40 a month. Why do I give them $40 a month and then also go out and spend 60, 70, $80 in the theater to watch that exact same movie that you trained me you'll drop on a streamer sooner rather than later? So they're going to have to do some adjustments. Some of the things that they've done before probably end up coming back around. You already seeing studios start to leave movies longer in theaters now. They're investing less into their streaming platforms and more into making their yearly fiscal budgets theatrical. So we are sort of seeing the writing on the wall that they're kind of getting, that cash cow they thought they found isn't as readily available to dump cash as they might have thought. Because at the end of the day, people only have so much expendable income. And if you're spending $40 for Max, Disney Plus, and Hulu, and then you're spending $7 or $8 for Stars, and you're spending $8 or $9 for Apple TV, and then you're spending $9 to $10 for Paramount Plus, you're spending more monthly than you would have ever spent to go watch a movie in the theater to begin with. So you're gonna have to do some adjustments. Speaking of streaming, we have a problem with that too, because now the audience has got to a point where they rather, or they enjoy more passive content. And what I mean by passive is you can have it on the TV, and meanwhile you're on Facebook or you're on TikTok, and that's on the screen over there, but you can hear it, but you're not really paying much attention to it. So you're not really that engaged. So the studios, getting wise to this, are starting to make content that are made for passive entertainment. And some of that is the reason why you don't get a season 2, you don't get a season 3, you don't get what you used to get on cable, where shows like Supernatural will last 10 seasons. Because if you're passively watching, then why would we invest 10 seasons of money into a show that you probably don't remember what happened yesterday anyway? And it's just one of those things where some of it's our fault, because we've gotten to a point where we don't appreciate good media. We don't come out and support good media. We don't come out and support original content. So the studios watching this and then looking at the losses that they of course themselves have created, but when you're trying to rebound, they're not doing it by putting it out of their own back pocket. They're doing it by putting it out of yours. So if you are more willing to spend money on the streamer, if I make you a show that you can listen to and also stream Facebook, that's the show I'm going to make you. And the sad part about that is that's the state of our media. And if that's where we are, then we're losing creative content. We're losing things that would grasp the audience and make it must-watch TV, make it something that you have to watch next week, make it something that you anticipate waiting for. And every week that it drops new episodes, you're on the edge of your seat to see how it finished or wraps up last week. And we're losing that. We're getting more reality TV, more things. I'm not saying that there's not an audience for that, but when they flood the market with it, we really do lose the creative side of entertainment. And I just wonder what that looks like when they start to realize that no one's watching this stuff. No one cares. I do think that there's enough of us out there and there's enough good content to sway them. Things like The Last of Us, things like Andor, Daredevil Born Again with its new resurgence. I think there's enough of us that still care about the medium to influence them to continue to make it. But I do feel like people need to put their phones down, maybe. And this is shown even when you go to a theater. It used to be an etiquette in a theater where you walked in and everyone knew to put your phones down. Everyone knew to be silent. Everyone knew to sit in your seats and don't say anything, because we've all paid money to collectively watch this state of medium. And the sad part about it is that you get a lot of the younger generation that go into a theater and they have their phones up because they're used to that passive entertainment. They're used to being able to do that at their home on streaming, which the studios created. So they're in the movie theater and they're on their phones, they're surfing Facebook, they have their bright lights on because it's dark in the theater, they're talking to their friends next to them. And it's just like I mentioned before, that snowball effect, that one thing adds to the next thing and adds to the next thing and adds to the next thing. And then ultimately, the studios are the ones that are killing themselves, is what I'm getting to. And there has to be a course correction. This ship has to be corrected because we already are losing physical media. We're already losing that. That's already going the way of the dodo. And streaming isn't the way. Clearly, it isn't the way because they've been trying to make it work this whole time, and it's not. The studios are losing billions trying to make that thing work. That cash cow they thought they found isn't as lucrative as they might expect it. So I just wanted to bring that to you guys' attention. Maybe some things about this segment tonight that you weren't aware of. Maybe some of the things about this industry you didn't know. And some of the things that I brought up, maybe it will enlighten you on how this all works. If you have more insight that you want to add to the channel, more to add to this topic, you can always feel free to drop down and leave a comment in the comment section below. Of course, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys on the next episode of Hudson's Highlights. Take care.